in flames here. We're going to lose our money. We're going to lose our profits. This Paul guy is going to take Idols R Us and put it out of business. Like, it's not going to work anymore. Like, guys, don't you realize this is the end of our known lifestyle? What are we going to do? He's closing the doors on us. And I hope you caught this. I hope you caught this. Demetrius tries to disguise his anger by paying lip service to the goddess Artemis. Did you catch that? He kind of said it like this. It's kind of like, hey, the real reason I'm angry is because Artemis is being robbed of her majesty. The real reason I'm angry is because the temple is being discredited. It has nothing to do with the fact that I'm going to lose all my money. The real reason I'm upset is because Artemis is being profane. We can see right through that. We can see through that lie. We know his true heart. Demetrius wants to stir the crowd up so they will take care of Paul for him, in the process wipe away his problem as they do that. So as we read, the people get into a frenzy. They get all stirred up, and they start chanting, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians! Great is Artemis of the Ephesians! Great is Artemis of the Ephesians!" to the top of their lungs. We're also told they can't find Paul, can't track him down, so they do the next best thing. They grab two of his traveling companions. They grab Gaius and Aristarchus and drag them into this amphitheater that we are told historically would hold 24,000 people. 24,000 people could be seated in this amphitheater in ancient Ephesus. Pretty much the seating capacity of one of our basketball stadiums around here. That many people in one spot. They're all there. Paul wants to go in. He wants to stand up for himself and for these people. He's wisely told not to, wisely convinced not to yet. And that's a long recap of what we studied, but I want to make sure we understand exactly what's going on. Again, have our finger on the pulse of what their culture was like, because there's one key point I think we see here in this part of the story compared to the part I just summarized at the beginning of chapter 19. Here's the truth. Jesus will cost you something. Okay? Following Jesus will cost you something. All right? Go back to the recap that I gave before we went to today's scripture. Let's contrast the reaction that the people who were practicing sorcery had earlier in the chapter compared to the people here that are silversmiths like Demetrius in this part of the chapter. Compare the two. The people who were practicing sorcery versus the people who were building and creating these idols. On one side, you have people who hear the good news of Jesus and instantly protect their belief in him, even going as so far as to tossing away things that had great value. On the other hand, you have people who hear the good news of Jesus and they instantly protect their lifestyle, even going so far as keeping things of great value. One message, two reactions. One message, two different reactions. One group clung to Jesus, the other group clung to comfort. And to tie this into last week, I really emphasized this hard last week, how being faithful to the calling of God can often mean you have to do something that's fearful. Let's be honest. There is nothing scarier. There's nothing that makes us more afraid than letting go of the things that make us comfortable. Is that not true? When we get used to something, we're comfortable with something. Whether it's an object, a person, a relationship, the way things are done, we get used to that. We have to let go of it. Man, that is scary. Man, that makes us uncomfortable. We don't like it. So guys, again, following Jesus will cost you something. Following Jesus will cost you something. I don't know what it might have already cost you. I don't know what it may cost you in the future. But it will cost you something. It may be your money. It may be your time. It may be your status. It may be your career. It may be your family. It may be your friends. It may be your relationships. It may be your life. Following Jesus will cost you something. Guys, there's a reason why Jesus himself said in Luke chapter 14, verse 33, those of you who do not give up everything you have cannot be my disciples. Y'all catch that? Those of you who do not give up everything you have cannot be my disciples. Jesus' point? His point was, since you don't know what may fight you for your attention, since you don't know what might fight you for your loyalty and for your dedication, just be prepared to give it all up. Just be prepared to give it all up. Because that one thing you think, oh no, I would never put that above Jesus. That's probably the one thing you actually would put above Jesus. So he's saying, just be prepared to give it all up. That way when it does fight you for me, toss it out. Toss it out like those sorcery scrolls. You have no problem letting go of it instantly, without hesitation. And here's the truth. If you're not willing to give up everything for Jesus, then I promise you that something will hold you back. And if that something exists, then I promise you the devil will use it to keep you away from Jesus. That's the way it works. If there's anything that can keep you from Christ, that is what the devil will use as a weapon against you to keep you from him. And here's the thing. Usually it's not sinful stuff. Your money is not necessarily sinful. It can be if it takes over your heart. It can also be used for good God-honoring purposes. Your family is not necessarily sinful. Some of you might argue that they argue about that. But you know my point. These are good things. These are gifts from God that are not necessarily bad. But when we put them above God, we put them above our relationship with Jesus, they become idols. And the devil will certainly use those and turn them around back against us. Again, if we're not willing to give up everything for Jesus, that something that we do keep will be used against us. For Demetrius, it was his love of money. It was his greed. It was his livelihood that he didn't want to give up. It was his comfort that he did not want to part with. What is it for you? I don't know what it is for you, but it's something. If that something exists, it can be used against you. Let's keep going, verse 32 now. Kind of see how this story ends. The assembly was in confusion. Some were shouting one thing, some another. Most of the people did not even know why they were there. The Jews in the crowd pushed Alexander to the front, and they shouted instructions to him. He motioned for silence in order to make a defense before the people. But when they realized he was a Jew, they all shouted in unison for about 2 hours, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians!" The city clerk quieted the crowd and said, "Fellow Ephesians, doesn't all the world know that the city of Ephesus is the guardian of the temple of the great Artemis and of her image, which fell from heaven? Therefore, since these facts are undeniable, you ought to calm down and not do anything rash. You have brought these men here, though they have neither robbed temples nor blasphemed our goddess. If then Demetrius and his fellow craftsmen have a grievance against anybody, the courts are open, and there are proconsuls, they can press charges. If there is anything further you want to bring up, it must be settled in the legal assembly. As it is, we are in danger of being charged with rioting because of what happened today. In that case, we would not be able to account for this commotion since there is no reason for it." After he had said this, he dismissed the assembly. Okay, so everyone's all confused. Everyone's confused. They're shouting different things, we're told. And I think it's hilarious that Luke, the author of Acts, he records that, quote, "Most of the people did not even know why they were there." Is it just me or is that funny? They didn't even know why they were there. I mean, they're all like, "I don't know what we're yelling about." Loud noises, you know? Is that Anchorman? Oh man, I'm in trouble. I put an Anchorman. But you get to the point like, "I don't even know what's going on. I'm mad and I don't know why. I guess I'm just mad because everyone else is." That's all they can come up with. And that's sort of that mob mentality that takes over, isn't it? I'll tell tell you this, we've seen it on the news a lot lately with riots and things like that. People will do things in a mob mentality together that they would never do individually. That's just sort of what happens. And that's what's going on with these people. They don't even know why they're there. They don't know what they're yelling about. They're just angry because a few other people are angry. And this is how crazy it got. This is how crazy it got. A Jewish guy named Alexander was kind of pushed into the crowd, pushed in front of everybody, and he's like, excuse me, I just want you to know that we as the Jews, we're not them. We're not one of them. FYI, we are not one of these guys. So if you're going to go on a headhunt after these Christians, we're not one of them. But the crowd's not dumb. The people of Ephesus aren't dumb. They know that the Jews worship the same one true God as the Christians do. So we're told they start the chant back up again. Great is Artemis of the Ephesians. Great is Artemis of the Ephesians. Great is Artemis of the Ephesians. Guys, they did it for 2 hours. Don't catch that. I'll be like, okay, 5 minutes, that's good. Point proven. Like 2 hours of this stuff. This crowd had literally just taken control of these 24,000 people. This mentality of the mob and just getting angry because other people were angry, just taking over everyone. And then we're told the city clerk kind of steps in and he calms the crowd down and says, guys, you realize they really haven't done anything wrong? You realize that technically they haven't broken any laws? So if we don't just simmer down now, we're actually going to be the ones to get arrested for causing a riot, for disturbing the peace here in Ephesus. The Romans are going to come after us if we're not careful. And you guys, I think it's very interesting. We see this assembly of people here in Ephesus. And it's a stark contrast to what we see the Christian church do in the book of Acts. You've got two contrasted assemblies, right? You've got a group of people in Ephesus who are assembling for no apparent reason to destroy lives. And you've got a group of people called the early church who are assembling for a united purpose, a united mission to enable lives, to redeem lives. Again, one group doesn't even know why they're getting together other than maybe to destroy some lives. The other group knows why they're together, knows what they're assembling, because they have a unified mission to redeem lives. Church, it's important we remember which one we are. We are not the group that assembles to destroy. We're not the group that assembles for no apparent reason. We have a purpose. We have a reason for what we do is to redeem and restore lives through Jesus. Again, we need to remember which one we are. Guys, as we looked at this story, I hope you paid attention to what Paul did. I hope you paid attention to his methods. I hope you paid attention to what he didn't do. Because there's a lot of that. There's some things he didn't do. And we maybe assume that those are things that actually caused the riot, but they were not. Because really, we know what caused the riot. Paul was hurting the livelihood of these people. But the riot was not started because Paul had been standing outside the temple of Artemis every day with his picketing signs. You know, he was not been standing outside there every day with his bullhorn yelling at these people saying, "You're going to hell for worshiping a false god." That's not why they were upset. Paul hadn't been bugging them like that, hadn't been annoying them like that. Did Paul know about the temples? Of course he did. Did he know about the idols? No question he did. But he wasn't yelling at lost people for being lost. He wasn't yelling at the world for being worldly. Instead, notice what Paul did and notice what worked. Paul spent his time consistently and obediently preaching the truth. And as Paul preached the truth, people responded to the good news of Jesus. And as people responded to the good news of Jesus, hearts were transformed. And as hearts were transformed, more and more people met Jesus and were set free from their sins. As more and more people met Jesus and were set free from their sins, less people were interested in Artemis and less customers were available for this sinful business practice. That's how it worked. That's how it worked. Guys, we can learn from Paul. We can learn a lot from Paul. So instead of rallying against what's wrong in the world, why don't we show the world what's right? Instead of spending all of our time and our efforts rallying against what's wrong, Why don't we show them what's right? What's going to convince the world that our good news is true isn't more people shaking their fingers at them. What's going to convince the world that our good news of Jesus is true is sold out, all in, committed and obedient disciples of Jesus who have denied themselves, who have counted the cost, and come to the conclusion that Jesus is worth the cost. That's what's going to change the world. That's what's going to convince the world our message is true. When hearts are transformed and we are passionate about spreading that to other people. Guys, we don't reach the world and we don't change the culture through protest. We use the message and the power of the gospel to change hearts. And that will change the culture. That will change the culture. But here's the thing. These are big, strong words I'm using, right? Commitment, obedience, sacrifice, submission. Those are scary words, aren't they? Those are scary thoughts. So here's what I want to make sure you got right. I want to make sure you're asking yourself the right question. If you're asking yourself, what will Jesus cost me? You're asking yourself the wrong question. The question you should be asking yourself is, what is Jesus worth to me? The question is not, what will Jesus cost me? But what is Jesus worth to me? You see, when Jesus is of supreme importance in your life, then everything else pales in comparison, including the very things that are holding you back and including the very things that are fighting for your allegiance. Is Jesus worth the cost? Is Jesus worth the cost? Let's make it personal. What is Jesus